Okay, this podcast is looking at population. So, in our first few podcasts, we introduced ecology and the different levels of study in ecology. One of those levels was population, and so that's a important level in the study of ecology because we can look at this and see um, how numbers increase and decrease of population. Um, so this is in populations. We can define a population again as a group of individuals of the same species that occupy general areas. So that's our definition of population, and we've mentioned that before. And so in this, we are ecology kind of looks at how these numbers increase and decrease, and then why this is occurring. Um, and determining the number of individuals in a population is sometimes easy, sometimes not so easy. Here's an example your book gives of populations and how they can fluctuate rapidly. These are starlings, and eastern starlings, they're non-native to the U.S., but now we have lots of them. And the spread of this has become damaging to a lot of native plants and species and agricultural crops and native other native birds. This is looking at the spread of that starling population up to the present, and from the time of their original um, movement into the United States. And the way they got over here is starlings were a common thing that was used by Shakespeare. Shakespeare used these in his writings a lot, and so there was this um, recognition of Shakespeare back in uh, late 1800s, and they were gonna honor Shakespeare by releasing the starlings in New York City, and so they released a bunch of them, and that's where it all started from. Their population was unchecked in their native place where they came from. They had a lot of predators that would keep their population in check. Here, they didn't have as much, so their population just skyrocketed. And so this shows the movement of their population across every 10 years, how far it's gone. And so this really shows you, and this has had damage on other populations that are in those areas. And so this is a very rapid increase of these populations. And there's been a lot of attempt to try to eradicate this species. Netting, DNR was given out, federal government was given money to bring these in dead, and but none of it worked. Their population is just too rampant. If you've ever been riding down the interstate, you just see these black birds start coming flying over and just never seems to stop. Those are probably starlings. All right, so that's an example of a population that just goes up high, left unchecked. Um, Sometimes populations are not easy to see, and so there's a method called mark recapture method that helps to get that number of how many are in this population. So here, say field mice in this field right here, you can't go out and count them. The mice stay secluded, so you capture them and you set traps out at certain locations, and then you come back, you check those traps, whatever's in there, whatever mice you mark those, release them, set the traps back out in this exact same location, and you come back in the exact same amount of time. You see how many are in the trap, how many have marks from the first trapping, and you plug those numbers into this um, diagram here, simple formula of the number marked in the first times the second catch over the number that were marked in the second catch. So you get 3 numbers there. You just plug that into a formula, and that gives you an estimated number. Now it's not perfect, and it won't give you the exact number. It's an idealized model. You can do it a few different times to get an estimate. But when you can't see the animal, that's a good way that ecologists will use. Now, sometimes animals don't stay evenly dispersed, and so we have 3 patterns that we can refer to when talking about how they group. So they can group together like this school of fish, that's called clumping, or they can be in kind of a uniform pattern. These penguins take enough space on this shore to where they can stick their arms out. If they don't touch another penguin, that's their space. Your book makes the connection that our little half-acre lots in this neighborhood's kind of like that. So a uniform, you can see a uniform pattern there. Or if you don't see either one of these, you just call it a random pattern. Now, when looking at growth and how growth occurs, we have some different ways of representing growth. We have what's called the exponential growth. That'd be like those starlings just skyrocketing. Your book mentions this example of these bacteria. The equation for this is G equals Rn. G is the population growth rate, R is the capacity to reproduce, and N is the population size. So we can graph this. When we put it on a graph, it looks kind of like a J, and so they call it a J-shaped curve. So the number of bacteria are plotted on the left side, and the time is on the bottom. Bacteria reproduce every 20 minutes, so you start with 1. In 20 minutes, you'll have 2. 40 minutes, you'll have 4. 60 minutes, you'll have 8. 80 minutes, you'll have 16. 100 minutes, you'll have 32, and so forth. But you see how this doubling every time it can takes on that kind of growth curve. And we'll see that for a while. That's a very common growth curve. They reproduce as much as they can, as fast as they can. But then they'll reach some kind of limit, whether they run out of food, run out of space. Here, this bacteria may run out of space, and so it'll level off. So the leveling off looks kind of like an S, so they call that an S-shaped growth curve. That's called logistic growth, when it hits that limiting factor that causes its population to level off. Here's a good example showing the two. Exponential growth, logistic growth. All right, so those are 2 different ways of describing growth as it occurs in populations. Other things we describe here are things like natality. Natality is the birth rate, how many individuals are made on a regular basis. Mortality is the death rate. Survivorship curves. Survivorship curves are the number of organisms that survive to reach a particular age, and there's really 3 different types. You have type 1, 2, and 3. Type 1, and this is percentage of the lifespan. So, and this is the number of individuals. So say you start with 100 individual humans. We exhibit type 1 survivorship curve. So if you start with 100 individuals, most of those are going to survive till later in the lifespan. I don't know what lifespan is, 86, something like that. So most individuals are going to survive well past the 50% of the lifespan and make it on to closer to 100%. And that's when everybody starts dying. And that's when the survivorship curve drops off. Type 3 is almost an inverse. Type 3 are like these oysters. Start with 100 oysters. I don't know what their lifespan, but this is 100% of their lifespan. Those 100 oysters, most of them die right off the bat before they reach 50% of their lifespan. And so type 3 is going to exhibit these organisms that the juvenile stage is very susceptible. Almost always that's the case, and that's predation that's occurring to the juveniles. So type 3, a lot of death right here. And then, but those that survive to 50%, they develop this shell. And so now they're set and they can survive to 100%. Type 2 is kind of in the middle there, these ground squirrels. They have some death early on, they have some death at middle age, and they have some death at older age. And so there's a lot of different things that go into the mortality of this individual. Get hit by cars. It doesn't matter what age you are, you can get hit by a car, and so there's different things, and not just one thing causing that. All right, let's see. So we know that there's a lot of factors that affect a population for it to grow, and generally there's going to be a mixture of these factors that fluctuate a population's growth in its life. But sometimes there's one factor that plays a major role, and so in this case, an example of predation occurring playing a major role in population is called boom or bust cycle. So here's two animals, a cat and a rabbit, length and a hair. So the lynx, the cat, is represented by the red bar. The rabbit is the black bar. So the population, as the rabbit is up high here to begin with, that's going to provide a lot of food for the cat. And so the cat starts increasing. As the cat increases, the population gets really big, they start eating a bunch of cats. And so eating a bunch of rabbits. Rabbits die down. When they die down, it won't be long till the cat dies down. And so it's a direct correlation between food being available and predators being available. And that's called boom or bust cycle. Sometimes there's a strong connection with a limiting factor like that. Other times, not so much. Now, one of the connections about the study of these populations is the principles of population ecology have these applications for the study of species that live in our area. So a lot of biologists can study these and look at these, especially like endangered or threatened species. And so we want to know these numbers. Are they going up? Are they going down? What's causing these numbers? So this is a practical application we have for understanding these. So here's an example. This is a red cockaded woodpecker, and it is native to Middle Georgia. So we have a famous species here from Middle Georgia. It's in our textbook, national textbook. But anyway, we're famous for not such a good thing, though. They're famous for the population being endangered. Now, this bird, it likes to have old growth pine trees to build its cavity, to build its nest. And so that's the kind of trees that it likes. But loggers and foresters also like those kind of trees. You can get a lot of 2x4s out of those kind of trees. So they clear cut and cut a lot of their habitat down when they do that. Good forestry practices they'll replant these trees, but they're not going to be the kind of old growth trees that they need for these cavities. So because of that loss of habitat, this bird has become endangered. Now, biologists have done all these management techniques to try to increase their population. We have areas that are protected here in Middle Georgia in Monroe County called the Piedmont Wildlife Refuge. And one of the things is in that area, there's some protected areas specifically for this bird. It has older growth pine forests in it that it needs for its habitat. And so that's one of the practical applications is looking at how we can manage the species that are here. Now, in our population is increasing, so we have more impact on plants and animals that live in our areas. And there's different, certainly different opinion from environmentalists about what the major effect is going to be and how to best handle that. But most say if we manage things properly, that we can still maintain this population, this huge human population. But it is important to protect these species that exist here, and that's something we're going to look at in our next podcast as well. All right, and that ends this one.